have now MC Vaijayanthi ji, a Stotra and a Kavya, memories of the invasion and Srirangam's tragic decades. So, of the same place, belonging to the same place.
Lakshminatha Samarambam Nataya Manamatyamam Asmatacharya Paryandam Vande Guru Paramparam. ஆராத அருளமுதம் பொதிந்த கோயில், அம்புயத்தோன் அயோத்தி மன்னர் கழித்த கோயில், தோளாத தனிவீரன் தொழுத கோயில், துணையான வீடனர்க்கு துணையாம் கோயில், சேராத பயனெல்லாம் சேர்க்கும் கோயில், செழுமறையின் முதலெழுத்து சேர்ந்த கோயில், தீராத வினையனைத்தும் தீர்க்கும் கோயில், திருவரங்கம் எனத் திகழும் கோவில் தானே. நமஸ்கார், வணக்கம். தமிழ்ல முன்னுரை கொடுக்கணும்னு சொல்லியிருக்கார் நாகராஜ் காரு. நான் ஆரம்பிக்கிறதே தமிழ் ஸ்லோகத்துல தான் ஆரம்பிக்கிறேன். இது ஒரு சின்ன ஸ்லோகம், அதிகார சங்கிரகம் பிரபந்தத்துல கிடைச்சிருக்கக்கூடிய ஒரே ஒரு ஸ்லோகம். இந்த ஸ்லோகம் ஸ்ரீரங்க மகாத்மியம், அதனோட தத்துவம் எல்லாத்தையும் சேர்த்து ஒரு சின்ன ஸ்லோகத்துல நமக்கு கொடுத்துடுறது. அதுல இருந்து தெரியறது இப்படிப்பட்ட ஸ்லோகங்களோட மகத்துவம் நமக்கு முதல்ல தெரியணும்னு. அந்த வழியில நமக்கு கிடைச்சிருக்கிறது தான் அபீதஸ்தவம் எனப்படு ஸ்ரீ நிகமாந்த மகாதேசிகன் எழுதின ஒரு ஸ்தோத்திரம். பயத்தை போக்கக்கூடியதான ஒரு ஸ்தோத்திரம். அது என்ன பயம்? ஸ்ரீரங்கத்துக்கு ஏற்பட்ட அபாயம். முகமத படையெடுப்பினால ஸ்ரீரங்கத்துக்கு ஏற்பட்ட பயம், ஸ்ரீரங்கத்திலிருந்து நம்பெருமானும் பாகவதர்களும் வெளியூருக்கு போக வேண்டி ஏற்பட்ட சூழ்நிலை, பூஜை புனஸ்காரம் எதுவும் இல்லாம ஸ்ரீரங்கம் ஒரு 40-50 ஆண்டு காலமா இருந்தப்போ பக்தர்கள் அடைந்திருந்த அந்த ஒரு பீதி, அந்த பயம், அந்த பயத்தை போக்கி முன்னாடி பாட்டு அவர் பாடினார், ஆழ்வார் பாசுரம். இச்சுவை தவிர யான் போ இந்திரலோகமாலும் அச்சுவை பெருணும் வேண்டேன் அரங்கமா நகருளானேன் பாடினா. அந்த மாதிரி நித்திசூரிகள் மாதிரி பாகவதாலாம் எந்திக்கும் இங்கேயே இருந்து ரங்கநாதனையே சேவிச்சுன்னு இருக்கணும். அந்த மாதிரியான நிலைமை வரத்துக்கு பயத்தை நீக்கி ஸ்ரீரங்கநாதனே அருள் புரியணும்னு அபீதஸ்தவம் பாடியிருக்கார். இந்த ஸ்லோகம் நமக்கு கிடைக்கிறது. அவர் அபீதஸ்தவங்கிற ஸ்லோகம், அந்த ஸ்லோகத்துக்கு, அந்த ஸ்தோத்திரத்துக்கு பலன் அளிக்கிற மாதிரி ஸ்ரீரங்கநாதனே அனுப்பின மாதிரி விஜயநகர சாம்ராஜ்யத்திலிருந்து கம்பனங்கிற ராஜா இங்க வரான். மதுரை வரைக்கும் படையெடுத்துட்டு சுல்தான்களை அழிச்சு மதுரையிலையும் ஸ்ரீரங்கத்திலையும் இங்க ஏற்பட்டிருந்த கூடிய துக்கத்தை எல்லாம் போக்கி அவனுடைய சேனாதிபதியா கோபநாரியன்கிறவன் ஸ்ரீரங்கத்துல நம்பெருமாளை திருப்பி கொண்டு வந்து சேர்த்து விருப்பண்ண உடையார் மூலமா பிற்காலத்துல உற்சவங்கள்லாம் தொடங்கி இன்னி வரைக்கும் இந்த உற்சவங்கள்லாம் சேவிச்சுட்டு இருக்கோம். ஆனா அந்த 14ஆம் நூற்றாண்டுல என்ன நடந்தது அப்படிங்கிற நினைவு இன்னி வரைக்கும் நமக்கு இருக்கான்னா நிறைய பேர்கிட்ட இல்ல. நான் இந்த பேப்பர் எழுதுறதுக்கு முன்னாடி நிறைய பேர்கிட்ட பேசி கேட்டு, இந்த ஸ்தோத்திரம் தெரியுமா, இந்த காவியம் தெரியுமா, இந்த நினைவுகள் இருக்கான்னு கேட்டு அதுக்கப்புறம் கெஸ் பண்ணி மட்டும் பண்ணல, கேட்டு இது நினைவுகள் யார்கிட்டயும் இருக்கிறது இல்லைன்னு. அப்போ பாக்குறப்பதான் என்ன தெரிஞ்சதுன்னா, நம்மளுடைய நினைவுகள் எப்படி ஒரு புத்தகம் நம்மகிட்ட சேராத்தினால, ஒரு மொழி நமக்கு தெரியாதனால எத்தனை விதமான தடைகளை ஏற்படுறது. அந்த தடைகளை நீக்கி பக்தர்களா நாம பண்ண வேண்டியது என்னங்கிறதுக்காக தான் இந்த பேப்பரை பிரசன்ட் பண்றேன். தேங்க்யூ. ஐ வில் ஸ்டார்ட் இன் இங்கிலீஷ். This is a short verse which I recited. This is part of the larger prabandham called Adhikara Sangraham. A poetic form like the shlokas, sutras, this too is a way of telling a story of philosophy in an easy to memorize and recite form. In a simple yet profound way, it introduces us to the greatness of the kshetra and the deity, as well as the importance of it to the devotees. Stotras like these are recited, read and internalized. In Sanatana Dharma tradition, the Shruti as in the herd and Smriti as in the memory form an important part. Srirangam, which hosts the annual festival of recitations, the Adhyayana Utsavam, shows clearly how the text through memorizing and reciting preserved them for a millennia. Recitation at homes, the annual recitation festivals that kept the Nalayira Divya Prabandham close to the devotees. That was also accompanied by a commentary tradition, the transmission of the text as well as connecting it to the theology. A magnificent temple, this abode of Vishnu, which we see in glorious form today, with so many utsavas throughout the year, had to cut short its Panguni Utsavam one day. The impending attack on the town made devotees look for a plan to safeguard the temple and the deity. The Moolasthana was closed and the Utsavamurti was carried out of the town to safety, and the temple remained shut for decades after the invading army massacred the devotees in the town, left it in shambles in the early 14th century. Historians like S. Krishnaswamy Iyengar, K. A. Neelakanta Shastri have all written about the Mohammedan invasions of South India. However, it is literature we turn to as powerful tool in preserving memory, passing on the emotional upheavals of a period, the social conditions. Stotra Abhidastavam, literally a prayer to remove fear of Swami Vedanta Desikan, and Kavya Madhura Vijayam or Veerakamparaya Charitram by Ganga Devi. As the two texts that I would like to highlight as memories of the dark decade Srirangam endured. Stotras of the genre, we have abundance of stotras. We have Abhidastavam. At a later stage, we also have a Telugu poetry, Venkatesa Vihara Satakamu, which talks about the impending attack on the Tirumala Tirupati by the Golconda Nawabs. So this kind of literature is available in abundance, but the problem is either they are lost or we are lost to the tradition because we don't know the language. Vedanta Desikan or Venkatanatha, as he was named, a polymath who lived in 13th, 14th century CE, has left behind a large body of literature spanning many genres, and significant are also his Stotra literature. He has sung on his favorite Archamurtis, Kshetras, philosophical explorations, and also on diet restrictions. In Tamil, Sanskrit, and also Prakrit and Manipravala. Abhidastavam is one such stotra addressed to Sri Ranganatha. Though as a stotra recited for protection and strength, Sudarshanashtakam is more popular, and Abhidastavam has remained a lesser quoted work. If he sang the praises of Vishnu's Chakra and Sudarshanashtakam, performed Prapatti and praised the 8 arms raising to protect the devotees who surrendered in Ashtabhujashtakam, in Abhidastavam the prayer is different. A prayer and a command to Vishnu to pick up his ayudas and to put them to use, to protect the Kshetra, to crush the enemies, to restore Nitya Pujas and normalcy at Srirangam. This is a shloka out of the 29 verses which is quoted very often because this is the only reference which tells you that there was an attack by the Turushkas. There is a Turushka mentioned in this shloka, like the Kali's battalions, like others. The Turushkas and Evanas have also spread fear among people. So he says, your panchayatas are very powerful. Use your panchayatas to crush the enemies and protect Srirangam. There are 2 different attacks that are mentioned as being the ones that impact the Srirangam temple, put together from traditional sources, travelers' diaries, and other records. The flight of the deity is more clearer perhaps as the result of the second attack, and the return is attested through an epigraphic record which is found dated to 1371. The 2 Mohammedan invasions, the first one by Malikafur around 1310 to 11 CE in south, and later attack by Ulugh Khan around 1323 CE, which is clearly remembered as the deadliest one from the traditional sources. When a few more verses are read together with the one which I had quoted above, the one which you saw earlier, I have quoted a few more verses in translation here for simplicity's sake. What circumstances would have forced a scholar who one would presume by his work and his life to be a pacifist to talk about using force, using weapons to destroy the enemy? Whatever force that was required to save the shrine of Sri Ranganatha, to see the return of the deity, and a prayer for restoration of normalcy at all Vishnu shrines. Verses 20 to 27 are more focused on the fear about protection of Srirangam and the explicit prayer. Verse 20 is a prayer for uprooting enemies of the devotees of Srirangam who seek nothing but praying to Archa, destroying them fully, the enemies fully, and establishing Sriranga Shri so that they continue to enjoy the worship of Sri Ranganatha and live like the Nityasuris, like how Nityasuris live in Sri Vaikuntham, the Bhaktas would live in Srirangam worshipping Sri Ranganatha. I will skip some of the verses and I will go to like how I got introduced to Abhidastavam. Why am I talking about a language distancing a text? It is not just a personal experience, it's the experience of many in Tamil Nadu. We don't study Sanskrit. My family itself, my mother's side, my grandfather was the last one who studied Sanskrit formally. And in my father's side, my father was the last person. There is a language policy which removes Sanskrit from curriculum. Even CBSE is forced not to teach Sanskrit in schools. So that is the kind of language policy we are seeing. And I got introduced to Abhidistavam as a memory from the devotees at Satyagalam. This is a temple at Satyagalam, which is near Sivasamudram in Karnataka district, where Vedanta Desikan, after leaving Srirangam, spent many years. When I went there, the devotees there gave me a copy of Abhidistavam, and they told me Vedanta Desikan composed Abhidistavam while he was living here. And they showed this Utsava Murti and the Murti of Swami Desikan there to say, like, he is seen in seated posture everywhere, you can see. His Vigraha Murti is in seated posture everywhere. At Satyagalam, he is there in a standing posture. He is forever alert, waiting for news from Srirangam to get back. So he was living there with that intense desire to come back to see Sriranganatha back in Srirangam. So it was at Satyagalam that the memory of Abhidistavam as a stotra that linked one to the memories of what happened to Srirangam came to me, not from whatever I could learn from here, not from the tradition that we got to know. In fact, there is an interesting commentary which mentions how elders looked at texts and which we fail to imbibe. There is a commentary by Veeraraghavacharya to an edition which has both Sri Stuti and Abhidistavam. He says, Sri Stutinal namakku shemam, Abhidastavatinal periya perumalukku shemam vaitadu. Sri Stuti confers prosperity on us. Abhidastavam gave Ranganatha the comfort. An intimate observation on other intimate devotees' appeal that has come down to us over hundreds of years and still remains in the memory of few devotees. Okay, the language problem I talked about too, I just have made only two mentions here. One is about the Dravidian ideology which kept the language out of curriculum and also wanted to remove certain literature out of school textbooks. Lot of religious literature that has come down as the medieval literature, so-called. The Sangam was acceptable, but the medieval literature, which was like religious literature, the Devaram, Tiruvasakam, Divya Prabandham, and Kambaramayanam, and all of them, they were not very acceptable. That comes from a certain ideology, and why do I look at it as a hurdle? Because if I am going to look at the school, Mr. Nair, when he spoke about the constitutional remedy, when he spoke about the Pancharatra Agama. Here I do not have a constitutional remedy. It is like an individual finally who has to take the efforts to keep this memory and these texts alive, because there doesn't seem to be any other recourse within the system here to remember these. Okay, now I will move to the Kavya part since we are running out of time. This is a unique Kavya, like how Abhidistavam was a unique sloka. This was a Kavya, one of the very few written by women authors. And this was written by none other than the wife of Kampana, who conducted the expedition down south to defeat the forces here. And Ganga Devi had written this verse in praise of her honor of her husband. His powers, how he defeated, how he fought, what happened. I didn't realize the importance of these two texts as eyewitness accounts till my professor used the term, oh, which century these authors belong to, she asked me. I said the date of Vedanta Desikan, I gave the date of Ganga Devi. She said, oh, they were Pratyaksha Darsha Sakshis. Till she used the term, I didn't think of them as eyewitnesses. We don't think of them as eyewitness accounts because they are not history. One is a Stotra, the other is a Mahakavya. These as genres do not appeal to us as history. But putting pieces together, I look at the Stotra, I look at the Kavya, and finally I see the 1371 epigraphic record. I can connect to the stories and the memories of Srirangam. I'll give a few glimpses of what Ganga Devi talks about the condition of Srirangam and condition of Mathura when she talks about the horrible conditions of the place when Kampana came on the expedition here. You can see in Srirangam, the Lord of Serpents is seen warding off tumbling debris of brick with his hood lest they fall and disturb sleep of yoga. That was the condition. She said, like, the temple doors have been eaten away by termites. Where the sounds of mridangam used to be heard, now it is only screeching sounds of owls that are heard. She says it's not only that, the parrots are speaking the language of Persian, they're not speaking the local language. So that is the extent to which the influence has been there. So that is the kind of gory depiction Ganga Devi gives, and that actually makes this text unacceptable to a lot of people who think like she could not have written it. The language is a hurdle in Abhidastavam. How a text is considered either as a literature or a literary evidence, that is a problem. I'll go directly to the problem now. There is this book, Textures of Time, written by Rao Shulman and Velcheru Narayan Rao, David Shulman and Sanjay Subramaniam. They quote lot of traditional accounts, Bakar's, Kaifiyat, Karnam literature and all that, to say like how they give us history. And in the conclusion, they have a chapter called Madura Vijayam and Pseudo-History. How do they come to the conclusion that Madura Vijayam is a pseudo-history? There is one quote which I have given here. I'll read it out. Ganga Devi was Kampana's courtesan. There is no reason to expect her to have produced a historical monograph as a birthday present for her royal lover. What we have naturally enough is more like a long birthday card. Ganga Devi celebrates at considerable length and with a certain charm her lover's physical beauty, erotic talents and athletic interests. She seems to know a good deal about all three domains, with somewhat surprisingly fuse in the military mission to Madurai. I have referred to 3 editions of Madura Vijayam. The first one published by the Trivandrum with the introduction by T.A. Gopinath Rao, then Trivenkatachary's, and latest one by Sujata Reddy. All of them mention Ganga Devi as the wife, the favorite wife of Kampana and all that. But Shulman Rao and Subramaniam dismiss her as a courtesan. It is not that courtesan is a word of disrespect, but they pick up and use this word courtesan to outright dismiss a text as being pseudo. So this shows us like whether the text will get passed on to us as evidence by the so-called people who set the syllabus and prescribe us textbooks. That is why I want to think of how we approach a Stotra and a Kavya, which was praised as a Mahakavya by the Sanskrit scholars, but historians, some of them, seem to dismiss it. As I said, I do not seem to have any other answers except for individuals, families to protect these texts and pass on the memories of it to their families and to this thing, the Sampradaya. Professor Meenakshi Jain has written about flight of deities. In Srirangam, we had flight of deity. Nambaramal went away. He was taken away on one side by Pillilokacharya. On the other side, Vedanta Desikan went to the text of Shuddha Prakasika. The Sampradaya showed that the text, deity, both being crucial and to be saved. That the memory that they fought, they protect to save the text and the tradition. I think that the memory has to be kept alive. Salman Rushdie says fiction is a powerful tool. The fiction which distorts also can be a powerful tool. But why not our traditional kavyas and natakas and stotras as a tool that pass on the memory to us and how we protect and preserve them? That is my humble submission. Thank you so much.
Wonderful paper and a lively presentation, highly interactive with the audience. And Vaijayanthi ji, let me tell you, don't worry, you call them historians, none of them is a historian. Velcheru Narayana Rao is a leftist literature scholar, he is a Marxist. So, you cannot expect anything more from him. David Shulman is in the crime in association with him, though he is by himself he is not into that. And Sanjay Subramaniam, we know, the gang, it's a gang of people. So let's not worry about them, that's what is expected of them, to call our historical kavyas as pseudo-history. That's a very heavy word to use for historical kavyas. And how can they use such heavy words? Criminal can use a heavy weapon. They are criminals. They use. So, don't worry about it. at the most you can say there are legendary elements in Kavyas because they are Kavyas, but your word eyewitness accounts is very, very apt to all the historical Kavyas of that period, and particularly because we are sitting here in Srirangam, and these two, the choice of the Stotra and Kavya was very, very apt.